So this is how you close the growth gap. This is the framework. It's a leadership framework. The methodology will change according to your individual circumstance, but the framework is central for all. You're probably doing one or more of these things really well. In fact, it might be a strength. It's what made you the success that you are today. But you're probably not doing the others so well, or they might be blind spots for you. And that's why this framework is so useful. What I know is that if you get good at all 5 of these elements, your organization and you will be able to realize more of your potential. So let's look at the 5 essential elements in the framework. It's best to do these 5 in order, and I'll tell you the order, but you don't have to do them in order. They can either go sequentially, which is what I recommend that you do, or you can do them in unison, or pick one, which is what you're not doing today, and start there. So here's an introduction to each of the 5, and then we'll look at each element in more detail. So the first element, create time to think. This is the gap of awareness of what is possible. The second element, avoiding the abundance trap, that's a framework for saying no. It's the gap between short-term feel-good and long-term strategy. It's about what not to do. The third element, align your stars. This is about resource alignment, clear goals, prioritize, reward the behaviors. The fourth element is hold your feet to the fire. It's about accountability, the gap between intention and behavior, the failure to follow through. It's about discipline, it's about measurement, and it's about success criteria. And lastly, and most important, is master the art of leverage. This gap is about leveraging yourself and leveraging your learning. So now let's add some detail to each of these elements. The first of the elements, create time to think. That's awareness of what is possible. I'm going to start with a story about Archimedes. So Archimedes, the ancient Greek creator, inventor, mathematician, one of the greatest mathematicians of all time. He defined pi, he created all sorts of things, including ship screws, and my very favorite, something called the Archimedes heat ray. So he used this during the siege of Syracuse, where he invented these glasses that would take the sun's rays, focus them on the ships in the harbor during the siege, and cause them to catch fire. And he did this in 200 BC. But the most widely known anecdote about Archimedes is how he discovered the method for determining the volume of irregular objects. He was working on a problem about the authenticity of a crown and the metal it was made from, whether it was just made from gold or it was made from gold plus some other base metals put in. So one day he got in his bath, and while he was in his bath, he noticed the water rose due to displacement. And he tied this in that moment to density. And that's when he was so excited, he jumped out of the tub and he ran down the streets naked and he yelled, "Eureka!" Now, I'm not suggesting that you're going to run down the streets of Atlanta yelling "Eureka!" in the nude, but I am saying that you will have more Eureka moments if you wrest back control of your time. This is one of the most important things that you can do. You will have more Eureka moments if you give yourself time to think. This is really what you're paid for. It's about getting away from the urgent and getting into the important. When we look back, often we'll report that failure to achieve is because we didn't think enough or we didn't think big enough. Are you just doing what needs to be done now, just dealing with the urgent? Research shows that we create best when we are in a state of relaxation, expansion, and curiosity. And for most of us, that only happens when we create time for it. I know most of the meetings that I'm in, they're not creative, expansive, and relaxed, right? We're just like click, 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 getting to the next thing that has to be done. So here's your first tip. If you don't create time for this, no one else will. It isn't a priority for someone else. They want you to focus on their urgent issues. Your leadership role, however, is to focus on the bigger issues, on what is possible before you set the course. As the leader of the organization, it's one of the highest and best uses of your time. You were paid above all to think and to implement that thinking. Too often we're simply sucked into urgent implementation and quick thinking. So time to think is also about no new input. This isn't a time for gathering more information. It's a time for synthesizing and making meaning, and for the truly important. For the big strategic items, it's a must. You need time to think on an individual, a team, and an organization level. So here's an organization level example. At one client that was going through a lot of major change in their industry, we created a summit and we brought together 24 industry leaders, all peers, all from different segments of the industry. We got them in a really beautiful, expansive setting at the top of the Trump Soho in the downtown Manhattan. All of this glass around, very expansive, and we created time to think. And what we asked these leaders to think about was this question: what are the most impactful trends that are affecting your industry today? And we had a morning of some pretty incredible dialogue and discussion, and we came up with the 5 most impactful trends. And then in the afternoon, we created time for them to think about this question. So if you were us, your hosts, who are your partner, your peer, your supplier, what would you do with this information now that you know the most impactful trends? And what really occurred was the company walked away with some amazing possibilities, far expanded from what they had thought about before. And the people who participated walked away happy not only with the great experience they'd had in this intimate setting, but also with stronger bonds to the company because they helped create their future. That's an outcome of time to think. So the next question really for you is to think about this. You're going to create some time to think for yourself, and I want to give you a question to begin, and that is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? That's a really powerful question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So just put that kind of in the back of your head and think about that for a bit. Often clients say they haven't reached far enough, they haven't gone high enough because they couldn't see beyond their current constraints. You can drop those constraints by asking the question first, and then by looking at the factors helping and hindering your success. You're still in control of what actually happens. You don't have to give that up. But taking the time and making the time to think about the bigger question, let yourself have almost no downside and a lot of upside in terms of thinking about possibility and potential.